Hi, I'm Jim, and today I want to invite you to look directly at something most people never dare to name: the pleasure of the avoidant. Sounds harmless, doesn't it? But ask yourself, what truly hides behind their quiet withdrawals? Behind the harmless habits like constant work, mindless scrolling, comfort eating, or charming small talk with no depth, maybe you've loved an avoidant. Maybe you are one. And maybe you've never realized this: an avoidant's pleasure isn't joy, it's survival. It's how they exist in the emotions they never learned to feel. In this video, we'll peel back the layers, from the mask of independence and rationality to the quiet ache beneath fake laughter. Through Carl Jung's timeless insights, we'll see the avoidant not as cold but as conditioned, trained to live without permission to need. I'm not here to lecture, I'm here to hold up a mirror. And if you stay till the end, you may never look at an avoidant or yourself the same way again. Subscribe, share, and stay until the last minute. Not because this video is good, but because you deserve to know what's truly driving you from within. If you've ever been avoidant or loved someone who is, you'll understand this isn't about being cold or uncaring. It runs deeper. It's a survival strategy crafted by unspoken wounds. And pleasure, what's supposed to be life's reward, becomes the most sophisticated disguise for avoiding emotional truth. Avoidants don't seek joy in what they do. They seek escape. They scroll not to connect, but because silence feels threatening. They eat not from hunger, but because their feelings have nowhere safe to go. They overwork not from passion, but because slowing down means facing themselves. That's not living, that's efficient avoidance. Carl Jung once said, "What feels good in the moment is often what prevents us from healing." And I'm not just the voice on a screen, I've lived this loop. So I say this with deep respect for your experience. Pleasure isn't a sin, but when it becomes a shield against pain, it morphs into a velvet prison. We don't avoid because we're weak. We avoid because somewhere in our past our feelings weren't welcome. Sadness was silenced with "don't cry." Anger dismissed as overreacting. Loneliness filled with things, not people. Slowly we learned. Emotion equals danger, distance equals safety. And so we became better at withdrawing than connecting. But let's be honest. Have you ever looked at your life and seen a string of habits you no longer control? Auto-scrolling, auto-muting, auto-smiling. That's when pleasure stops being reward and becomes reflex. And I'm not here to blame you, I'm here to remind you, you deserve more. You deserve a life where your emotions are heard, not hidden. Where joy isn't a hit, it's a homecoming. When you pause, really pause, you'll find that the discomfort doesn't come from a lack of pleasure, but from a lack of connection with yourself. This truth is not easy, but it's the beginning of freedom. Freedom from the urge to flee. Freedom from the pressure to always be fine. And the miracle? When you finally dare to stay with yourself through the discomfort, you begin to resurrect the self-respect that's been quietly waiting within you. And then, when we finally realize that pleasure is no longer a reward but a reflex, we arrive at an even deeper truth. Pleasure isn't just a mask over our emotions, it's anesthesia for a nervous system that once carried too much. For the avoidantly attached, their nervous system never got to panic, but also never got to relax. They live in freeze mode, unable to get too close, but unable to walk away from themselves. And in the midst of that emotional limbo, pleasure enters like a gentle, dangerous drug. Avoidants rarely complain. They won't say, "I'm hurting," they won't text at midnight or sob in the bathtub. Instead, they turn on Netflix, they scrub dishes, they plan their week in meticulous detail. Don't let the calm exterior fool you. It's not serenity, it's emotional anesthesia at its finest. Pleasure, in the inner world of an avoidant, doesn't feel like celebration. It feels like a soft pillow placed over a wound they refuse to touch. every moment of self-reliance, every busy schedule, every "I'm fine," is the body whispering, "I don't believe it's safe to feel here." And that deserves respect. They survived on their own, but the cost was disconnecting from their own feelings. Have you noticed they can't sit in silence? There must be music, a phone, a screen, something to fill the space. Because in that stillness, the deepest fear might rise, the feeling of being unseen, unheld, unnecessary. When pleasure becomes anesthesia, we no longer feel pain, but we also lose the ability to feel real joy. Not because we're unworthy of happiness, but because we've forgotten how to recognize it. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Unless we look at how we use pleasure to numb ourselves, we will keep repeating the loop: emptiness, quick fix, repeat. I don't say this to make you feel wrong. I say this because I believe you're strong enough to face what you've once avoided. And I believe true self-respect isn't about holding the perfect image, it's about removing the armor when you no longer need to hide. Imagine a moment. No music in the shower, no phone in bed, no need to do something just to feel okay. Just being fully, presently with yourself. That's when you stop being a controller of avoidance and start becoming a friend to your own heart. And in that moment, pleasure is no longer anesthesia. It returns to what it was always meant to be, a celebration of truth, not escape. But pleasure isn't just a survival reflex in the present, it's the ripple of something far deeper, an unspoken memory from childhood. As children, we didn't know how to scroll, drink, or overwork to calm ourselves. But we knew how to cry. We trembled when we needed a hug. We got angry when we felt unseen. These raw emotional instincts, if met with presence and care, gradually form the foundation of emotional confidence in adulthood. But for avoidance, that process was interrupted. Maybe they once fell and no one noticed. Maybe they were given a cookie instead of comfort. Maybe they were told they were too sensitive, or forced to stop crying because boys don't cry, or heard, "Be strong, mommy's tired." Different words, same message. Your emotions are inconvenient. To be loved, you must be quiet, strong, and suppressed. So a sophisticated defense mechanism formed. Instead of expressing, they observed. Instead of feeling, they managed. Instead of needing, they withdrew. And to fill that emotional gap, they turned to quick pleasures, things that asked for no intimacy but gave enough distraction to forget the ache. Carl Jung never said we could avoid wounding. He warned that when wounds go unfaced, the shadow takes over from the unconscious. And the shadow of the avoidant is this: shame around feeling. They don't want to be seen needing. They don't want to be caught longing. They build an emotionless facade, not because they're cold, but because once emotion got them abandoned. And the hardest part, they don't even know they're doing it. They think they're strong, independent, that needing no one is safety. But that very armor separates them from the connection they still long for. You'll see them polite but distant, helpful but private, busy but never fully present. And behind all that, a child once taught to self-soothe in silence, to swallow tears. Imagine this. If a child could trust that when they cry, someone would sit beside them, not to fix or hush, just to stay, that child would grow up not needing to numb with pleasure. They grow up knowing, feeling is safe, feeling is the way home. Once we've understood how childhood emotional disconnection shapes everything, we can finally see that avoidants aren't people who don't want intimacy, they're people who don't know how to stay in it without feeling overwhelmed. The fear isn't about the other person. The fear is rooted in this silent question: if I'm honest, will I still be loved? If I'm vulnerable, will anyone stay? That's when false pleasure starts replacing real joy. Avoidants still laugh, but it's the kind of laughter that avoids eye contact, They still talk, but only at surface level. They still love, but only when it doesn't require them to face their own feelings. They choose quick comfort because what they truly long for, deep, soul-filling pleasure, often comes with the risk of being emotionally exposed. And they were never taught how to handle that. True pleasure for someone conditioned to avoid doesn't come with a high. It arrives in quiet, grounding moments, when they sit down and feel instead of flee, when they speak honestly about their loneliness instead of hiding behind a joke, when they finish something they've long feared instead of unconsciously delaying it. Those joys don't scream, but they linger, they satisfy, they don't need to be repeated to feel enough. Avoidants are often mistaken for being cold, when in reality they're so afraid of losing connection that they sacrifice authenticity to keep a performance going. But deep down they know the joy they're living isn't whole. A vulnerable conversation makes them uneasy. An honest gaze unsettles them. And yet, when they return to familiar pleasures, Netflix, scrolling, overworking, the emptiness remains. Carl Jung once said, "The truth may not make you safe, but it will make you free." And real pleasure, the kind that makes you feel fully alive, only comes when you stop living as a character in your own avoidance script. When you show up as yourself, not the fine one, not the rational one, not the too busy to feel one. Here's the difference between false and real pleasure. False pleasure needs constant repetition. It's the caffeine of the soul. Spikes, then crashes. Real pleasure moves slower, goes deeper, and leaves a lasting warmth because it touches the raw, hidden core of who you are. If you've ever sat in silence with someone and felt completely seen, you've felt real pleasure. If you've done something brave that no one noticed, but you knew, that too was real pleasure. And that is the kind of joy worth living for. Not because it's intense, but because it doesn't require you to betray yourself to feel it. Avoidants aren't incapable of feeling, they've just lacked the safety to feel, and thus the trust that deep things are meant for them. But you can choose differently, you can begin with yourself, you can train your nervous system to stay when it wants to run. Try this. Stay 10 seconds longer in silence when someone looks at you with care. Speak one honest sentence instead of keeping it in. Finish one small thing you've been avoiding and let yourself be proud of it. These are the moves of someone who is shifting from avoidance to presence. And when presence becomes stronger than fear, real pleasure returns, not as an addiction, but as an act of deep self-respect. When an avoidant begins to taste real pleasure, the kind that comes from presence, not numbing, they encounter another door. The pain they thought had disappeared. But the truth is, it never left. It was just buried beneath action, achievement, and a carefully managed sense of being fine. Now, without the anesthesia of false pleasures, that buried pain begins to speak. It's not the pain of rejection or heartbreak. It's the quiet ache that comes from being disconnected from yourself. Avoidants aren't addicted to work. They're addicted to the feeling of doing something so I don't have to feel anything. They're not addicted to their phones. They're addicted to the sense of, I'm busy, therefore I exist. They're not addicted to independence. They're addicted to, if I don't need anyone, I can't be hurt. But the deeper truth is this. Avoidants don't withdraw from others first. They withdraw from themselves. They abandon the inner child who longs to be heard, held, acknowledged, and replace it with a persona that's calm, rational, stable. One that society rewards. They live as if they are a project to manage, instead of a person to connect with. This is why simple pleasures, rest, love, being seen, feel uncomfortable. Because those don't stimulate the nervous system that's being wired for survival. Silence feels like emptiness, rest feels like guilt, love feels overwhelming. Not because they're unworthy of love, but because they've been away from themselves for so long they don't know how to receive it. Carl Jung once warned, When the inner world is ignored, the outer world becomes louder. And can't you see? Modern life is masterful at being loud. The phone ping, the Zoom call, the never-ending to-do list, the endless casual relationships. All of it says, don't stop, don't feel, don't listen inside. But that's unsustainable. Because buried emotions don't disappear, they mutate. They become chronic tension, quiet depression, a gnawing sense of emptiness in an otherwise perfect life. When an avoidant finally slows down, feels and turns inward, they don't just reclaim connection with others. They begin to remember what was once real inside. They recall forgotten joys, they see dreams they once tucked away. They meet the eyes of their inner child in the mirror, and instead of ignoring them, they pause and say, I'm here, I see you, you don't have to hide anymore. That's the turning point, when you are no longer a stranger to yourself. When you stop living as a strategy and begin living as a human being who knows their worth even in imperfection. And here's the strange gift. Once you reconnect with yourself, you no longer need to numb. You don't need to stay constantly busy. You don't need pleasure as a drug. Because what you truly needed, connection with your own soul, is returning. When an avoidant begins to return to themselves, the hunger they felt for so long isn't for love, it's for presence. And presence doesn't come from doing more, achieving more, or becoming enough. It comes from stopping. That may sound simple, but for an avoidant, stopping is the most courageous thing they can do. Because in the very moment they stop running, they come face to face with their deepest fear, inner silence. No one left to blame. Nothing left to distract them. Just one question, echoing in the quiet, a question they've spent a lifetime avoiding. If I'm not doing, not performing, not perfect, who am I? And that's where awakening begins. Not through fireworks or dramatic declarations, but through a quiet surrender. A surrender not born of failure, but of exhaustion from self-betrayal. They surrender to the truth that they're still hurting, still longing, still needing something they've never allowed themselves to name. And strangely, in that surrender, they discover a kind of freedom they've never known. No more pretending to be fine. No more using logic to suffocate emotion. No more bracing themselves against the ache. They realize, I can feel and still survive. Carl Jung once wrote, we do not become whole by denying our broken parts, but by integrating them. Avoidants don't need to change their nature. They don't need to become emotional or dependent, as they feared. They only need to allow their heart to have a seat at the table, not locked away in silence. And this is the true awakening. It's when they're in a quiet room and no longer feel panic. It's when they don't reach out just to fill a gap, don't eat just to numb, don't rush to prove their worth. They no longer avoid feeling because now they are strong enough to stay and feel. On the outside, no one may notice anything has changed. But on the inside, an emotional earthquake is underway. The old belief is collapsing that I'm only lovable when I'm fine. And a new belief begins to take root. That I am worthy even when I'm hurting, even when I'm scared, even when I don't yet know the way forward. The awakening of an avoidant is never loud. It's not applause. It's not affirmation. It's a quiet moment, standing in the middle of a storm within, saying, I won't abandon myself anymore. And that, no matter how small, is a quiet revolution. No one needs to witness it. No one needs to understand. Because in the end, the one who needs to stay is you. That quiet awakening isn't the end. It's the beginning of something far more profound. The journey back to yourself. And this isn't a glamorous journey. It doesn't look like healing retreats or triumphant declarations of, I've made it. It's a solitary, deep, and courageous path where the avoidant relearns something they once forgot, that their full self, with all its emotions, wounds, and longings, has always deserved to be here. Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, For the avoidant, this doesn't mean becoming overly emotional or dependent as they once feared. It means allowing themselves to need without shame, to feel without retreat, to want without apology. They learn to sit with silence without flinching, to let someone truly see them without turning away, to say, "I need you," and not feel small or weak for it. This is a journey of small, radical steps. It's when they don't pull back when someone gets close, when they tremble but still open up, when they redefine strength no longer as the ability to endure in silence, but as the courage to let someone witness the parts they once hid. In a world that glorifies independence, avoidants once believed that needing less was the safest route. But as they walk the path home, they begin to realize the less they needed others, the further they drifted from themselves. The more they locked away their feelings, the more they lost connection. And the more they pretended to be fine, the more they abandoned the most human parts of themselves. There is no map for this path, no milestones to measure, just one compass. Radical honesty with your own emotions. And patience, because healing isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. When an avoidant dares to enter the room within, a room once filled with silence, memories, and disconnect, they no longer search for someone to rescue them. They become the one who sits beside their inner child, takes their hand, and says, "I'm not leaving anymore. I won't silence you to be loved. I will live honestly, whether others understand me or not." And from that place, from this deep loyalty to the self, they become unshakable, no longer easily swayed by praise, no longer falling into shallow relationships, no longer trading peace for the feeling of being chosen, because once you return to yourself, you become home. You no longer need external approval to feel enough. You no longer chase pleasure to feel worthy. You no longer let the emptiness inside dictate the choices outside. You live not to avoid pain, but to touch real life. And if this path feels slow, quiet, unseen, that's because it is sacred. No one can walk it for you, but once you do, the world around you will know. Someone has come home, and that is a force nothing can shake. And so, we've come to the end of this journey, from what looked like harmless habits to the deeper truths beneath the mask called "I'm fine." From subtle emotional anesthesia to the bravery of pausing and listening. From avoiding emotion to finally touching your own heart, with both trembling and self-respect. If you are an avoidant, I'm not here to change you. I don't want you to become soft, needy, or someone you're not. I'm simply inviting you to become someone who can stand in the center of their own feelings and not collapse. Someone who can say, "I'm not okay," without shame. Someone who can need another and still know their worth is not reduced by it. Because the most sacred thing is not to need no one, but to never abandon yourself, even when no one stays. Healing doesn't come from efforting harder, it comes from the courage to stop running. And when you stop running from yourself, you'll realize pleasure is no longer a hiding place. It becomes a natural part of a full life. Silence is no longer frightening, it becomes the clear voice of your soul. You no longer need to be chosen, because you have chosen yourself. Carl Jung was right. Becoming yourself is the greatest privilege of all. And if you've read this far, perhaps you're already on your way home. There's no rush, no perfection required. Just stay.